Hey everybody, this is Eden of Light Cycle Astrology. Hope you guys are doing well out there and happy Monday. Today is Mantic Monday episode number 49, where we are taking a look at Mars's entrance into the sign of Cancer this week. And I'm going to do some horoscopes for all 12 rising signs. For one, because you guys have mentioned in the comments that you like the horoscope videos a lot. And of course it makes sense because it's really neat when you can see astrology, how that is reflecting events or personal psychological events that are happening in our own lives versus just being kind of like a thing that's happening to all of us. So we'll do horoscopes for all 12 rising signs. Now, Mars enters the sign of Cancer on Thursday this week, and then is going to be there until November 2nd. And then Mars enters the sign of Leo, but because Mars will turn retrograde in the sign of Leo at the end of the year, by January the 6th, Mars will retrograde back into the sign of Cancer and then finish up the retrograde there and then stay until April the 17th, where Mars finally re-enters the sign of Leo and is out of Cancer. Now, I think that is, I don't know what the math is. I think it's around 7 months in total that we have Mars in Cancer, 6 or 7. And so it's a good time to take a look at the particular house topics that Mars may be activating based on your rising sign. And of course, how that works for Hellenistic or practicing ancient astrologers is that ancient astrologers were using a whole sign house system. So what that means is essentially when planets enter signs, they not only are entering that sign, but they're also entering a new whole house. So is Mars entering your 4th house and leaving your 3rd if you're an Aries rising, and so on and so forth. So because we can root the birth chart in these particular house topics, I'm going to do my best to offer up some of my ideas as to what Mars might be activating for you personally based on the house topics. Now, one thing, just some housekeeping to note here, is that this is Mantic Monday episode number 49, which actually should have been last week's Mantic Monday episode. But last week, Hurricane Honu was coming through, and right as I was getting ready to make the video, I lost power. And also it was such a big storm that I really wanted to keep my awareness sort of fully on my family and the property and the home and stuff like that, because I had a river running through the property, which I normally don't have. I had water flooding underneath like 2 different doorways in my house that I was mopping up and putting boards against and all this stuff. And I had trees like sapling trees that were bending all the way over, and I was out there in the rain trying to stake them up to save them and all sorts of things. So I was just keeping an eye on home and family. Now, this is kind of apropos as a subject for today's video because Mars in Cancer has a lot to do, or can have a lot to do, with home and family. Archetypally, Mars in Cancer oftentimes can be about either conflict or kind of a protection, or like a definition, a sort of sometimes like fighting or struggle. You know, Mars often is associated with how we are showing up in the world as a warrior. So think of like the warrior archetype, and then it's moving into the moon's sign of Cancer, right? And the moon has often been associated with things like home, family, but even like the city or the nation that you belong to. It's sort of this lunary realm of the network of friends or loved ones that are like family that we sort of are attached to. That's sort of connected with the moon symbolism. And then you have Mars moving in there. So there is kind of the warrior part of ourselves that is going through a process that may be speaking to parts of our lives connected with family or security, or the things that are spiritually kind of holding us to our lives or something like that. You know, it has that real nurturing way in which it's like we're a nurturing warrior, or maybe we're dealing with conflict in the home, or maybe we're renovating or something like that. But of course, that archetypal dimension is now brought into a particular house based on a rising sign, and then we can add in those house topics. So that is what we're going to be looking at today. Now, before we get into it, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, hit notifications, help me grow the channel so that this is going to be reaching more people. And also, you can always go to lightcycleastrology.com if you're interested in getting a reading from me. Pretty much the reason why I make the videos is to meet new people that can be clients of mine so we can expand our astrology business. Kate and I have been working on for about 2 or 3 years now. So if you're interested in a reading, you can check out prices. You can contact me and ask questions on Light Cycle Astrology. Okay, now let's go ahead and bring up the real-time clock here, and we'll take a look at the timing of Mars entering Cancer, and you'll also notice that we have Aries on the as the first house on the ascendant here. So we'll start horoscopes. Before we do, though, look at how Mars on September the 5th, this Thursday, has just entered the sign of Cancer down here at the bottom of the chart. Now, just interesting things that are happening this week that I'm not going to really talk about today, but just things that you might be interested to know about. We're having a new moon come through on Tuesday this week in the sign of Virgo that is kind of close to an opposition with Saturn. So we have the new moon come through on Tuesday. Then we have a sun perfecting an opposition aspect happening on Thursday, the same day that Mars enters Cancer. And then by Monday, September the 9th, Mercury also enters Virgo after its retrograde. So kind of a lot of astrology happening this week, and that would be plenty to talk about. But Mars entering Cancer for me is probably the thing that's going to really stand out the most because it's such a drastic sign change. And again, Mars is going to be in this sign for quite a long time. So let's now start the horoscopes, and we will talk about Aries on the ascendant here first. So if you are an Aries rising, Mars is entering your 4th whole sign house here. And so this is almost a doubling up of the house topics with the sign topics of Cancer, right? The 4th house is traditionally associated with things like home, family, property, the father, or sometimes parents, but even almost more specifically, a lot of times you hear the father being mentioned. And of course, Cancer, like we were saying a moment ago, is also somewhat connected, being a sign where the moon is the ruler of, having those same familial kinds of connections. Now, one thing that's interesting, though, is that the 4th house, it's also at the bottom of the chart, and it can also signify not just the home or the family or like the physical residence where you're located, but it can also be such things as the foundation of support or things that support you in your life. So for instance, if you have a bank account and you psychologically feel supported by the fact that you have like this resource, that can also be a 4th house thing, even though typically we think of finances as being like in the 2nd house, and they are, of course. But whatever is something that is almost like a support system, kind of like the grounds that you stand on. You know, this is a house that is at the bottom of the chart, meaning it's basically directly below your feet. So actually the reason that ancient astrologers associated the 4th house or the anti-culmination house, this archon, with things like the father or parents or home, is precisely because it was directly below our feet. And so it was things connected, or having a similar association with that which we stand on for support, like the solid ground. The parents are the first form of support. And in ancient times, the father was really crucial in such things as what kinds of things would be passed on, and the first child would get the land and the second child would get this, and so on and so forth. So the father had a lot to say in ancient times in that kind of cultural, setup that was going on back then, with the father having a lot of power and able to provide the native with a pretty good amount of support. The mother can also be associated with the fourth house, but in some people speculate that the mother being more of a visible creator of children while she's pregnant, being very visible with that big round belly, is sometimes more associated with the 10th house. But you can have parents being associated with the fourth house. So Mars entering the sign of Cancer, a sign that is connected with home and family and things like that, and Mars entering the fourth house, you get a doubling up of sort of the warrior archetype, maybe being active, maybe activating things of the home, the family, but also it can mean at times something like, are you having to almost fight a psychological battle on that which is supportive of you? So if there are things that are changing, maybe there are changes that are happening in life, and it might feel as though the ground is somehow like you're having to fight or defend for the same kind of psychological support that you're used to, that is going to be connected with the changes in life, like of course, like the obvious example is having to move, right? And it's really unnerving when you have to move because everything is thrown into chaos and you don't have that sense of like, well, this is the way it's always been. I live in this place. I have roots in this place. I have friends close by. I have family close by. And so while it may not mean Mars in the fourth house that everybody's going to have to move during Mars in Cancer, it can that can be an example for how a form of support can feel psychologically like maybe there's the need to protect it or hold on to it or sort of defend it or fight for it. So you get that kind of a thing. Now it can also be spread out, though. It can have to do with other forms of belonging, like the nation. You could have Mars entering the sign of Cancer if you're an Aries rising, and all of a sudden a person feels like they need to go out and advocate or protest or join a group that is, politically advocating for one thing or another, especially if it has to do with like the rights for women's reproduction or the rights for family or home, but in the context of, let's say, like what's happening in your city or your nation, right? So those are some things to watch for. You think about the warrior archetype having to defend, having to protect, maybe having to fight for, or maybe having to struggle through some conflict as it deals with topics of forms of support, psychological support, external support, like where you live and things like that. That's what I would watch for if you are in Aries rising. And hopefully that's enough context to sort of meditate on it and see how this is maybe beginning to activate topics around these kind of areas in life. Okay, now let's move the real-time clock forward to place Taurus on the ascendant here. And if you are a Taurus rising, this is Mars entering your third house. And Mars entering the third house is interesting. The third house is often associated with the psychology of the mind. Also things like marketing. The reason for this is because the way that the diurnal motion moves the chart throughout the day, it's sending the third house away from the fourth. So it's connected with the home and family. It has a connection with siblings and relatives or even people that come to visit. But oftentimes it's associated with the kind of the way in which things are sort of connected with the mundane parts of our lives and how that connects with the immediate environment. And the most immediate environment oftentimes is the sort of the things that are happening in our mind. And it can almost be sometimes related to the habits, like the mental habits or the routines that you're used to, or the people that you're used to seeing every day, or the commute that you're used to doing every day, or the customs or rituals that are happening. So like the third house is the place where it's like, do you get up at a particular time and you go into the kitchen and you make your coffee, and the kind of routines that we're very used to is very a third house environment. You go to the gas station on Thursdays and you fill up or whatever it is, but you do yoga before you begin your day or whatever it is. But those routines, and especially the kind of mental routines that we have, alongside of anyone that has a part of their lives that is um, like connected to advertising or the trading, the buying of selling of things in the immediate environment, or even online, which is kind of an immediate environment. But you have this, you have sort of the water that is the water of our lives that we're sort of swimming in, and how that environment is, we're used to it exchanging with other people, exchanging ideas, or exchange in from one ritual to another. Third house, a little bit elusive to sort of get a strong sense of. It's not so obvious, but it's sort of the everyday environment and the everyday rituals and habits, the everyday people that we run into or have conversations with, the coworkers. Those things are becoming activated by Mars at this time. So one thing that is for sure about Mars in the sign of Cancer in the third house is that you could get anything from having to be a warrior for cousins, relatives, family members, siblings, childhood friends, or it can be anything from being an advocate in your school district. It can be somebody that is fighting on behalf of like local, what would you call it, like regulations, or somebody that is showing up as a warrior that says, hey, we need this in our town, or we need this in our community, or even in a market that we belong in. So you could get somebody really showing up as a force advocate if you are like an advertising agent, and all of a sudden coming to the table with some really aggressive selling strategies or something like that. So you get this watery environment that is very about the everyday, and the warrior archetype is sort of moving in there, probably bringing changes, challenges, maybe even the loss of particular things that are usually around us. Maybe this is the loss of we have to move and we're not around the people that we're used to, or something like that. So a little bit more of an interesting one to see Mars entering, but think about the daily rituals, the daily habits, the mental environment as well internally. So this is a thing where you could very much have a little bit more tension, stress, aggravation, maybe even dealing with some psychological anger that's coming up that maybe is something that always irritates you every single day. Or, it could be like a coworker that you're always around, that it just somehow always rubs you the wrong way. And maybe that's some topic that sort of comes to the forefront right now and has to be dealt with, or something like that. So think about those third house kinds of things, the everyday environment, the everyday people, the everyday rituals, the everyday mental habits or routines, the everyday psychology that you sort of don't notice that you have, the ruts that you're in, sort of being kind of dealt with on a real psychological way, and having to show up as a warrior that may deal with conflict, strife, problems, maybe even separations away from certain circumstances, or having to remove yourself from certain circumstances that you normally have, or something like that. So that is for Taurus rising, that may be the warrior's motif that is coming in for you right now. Just that very mundane, practical sense of the everyday surroundings that is being activated a little bit more strongly right now. Okay, if you are a Gemini rising, this is moving Mars into your second house, a house that is associated with finances, possessions. But even interestingly enough, in ancient astrology, the second house was associated with personal assistance. So if you have somebody that works or is a helper of you personally for specific things, like I don't know, like a nanny or like a tax accountant or anybody that is kind of a personal aid or assistant, can also be kind of like a personal resource. So even like a lawyer that's working on your behalf or something like that. Now, Mars moving into the sign of Cancer could archetypally suggest that there is the need to be a warrior around your finances, especially if your finances are tied in with the family or the home or the mother or something along those lines, where it's like you it could be anything from having to pay for someone in your family, and Mars suggests kind of like a diminishment or a loss of the bank account, or it could mean that you're real aggressive in your work and really going after like a bigger paycheck and showing up as a warrior and sort of taking what's yours almost. It could mean that there is psychological tension or stress around not having enough and just feeling like, I don't have what I need. I need to take action and bring myself more seeds for the future. I need to get out there in the garden and till that soil up and plant this seed. And maybe I need to work on this skill that down the road provides some monetary potential or something like that. If you're an investor of anything, especially I would think with Mars and Cancer, an investor in property, right? Or an investor in your community, or in even like providing a what would you call it, like a donation to a campaign or something like that. Anything like that, any kind of investment where you could put your own money into, and it could be that there is kind of a risky, aggressive, or kind of a risky strategy for investment, or it could mean that you invest in something that is very protective of something like somebody's like a political campaign or like a cause, and you want to protect with your money the kinds of things that you're an advocate for or something like that, especially as if it feels like it's really important spiritually or has a connection with your home or family or your community or something like that. But oftentimes Mars in Cancer might mean that there is going to be definitely a struggle with finances as it pertains to, maybe just dealing with the everyday budget. Like, do we have enough money for the home and family, or do we have to tighten up the purse strings or something like that? So I would look for some of those things if you are a Gemini rising. Okay, if you are Cancer rising, let's move the real-time clock forward. And of course, if you're Cancer rising, Mars is entering your first house. So, wow. What a existential place for Mars to be entering into and activating the first house topics of the physical body, the self, the personality, the identity. It's really, with Mars in the first house, like you are embodying this Mars in Cancer archetypal energy. It's like, while other rising signs might be noticing that there are particular challenges or warrior battles that are happening in particular arenas of life, this one is more about your soul or your personality, your identity, or your physical health or body or something like that. So this can be a time where you advocate for your own health very strongly. And that might be because there is a need to become more healthy or to fight off something that is unhealthy or is a challenge to health or something like that. And definitely it can also be that Mars entering your first is bringing you into a space where psychologically you're going to play the role. Like if life were a play and we get to choose our own character, it's like I'm going to choose the character of the protective mama bear to probably not only myself, but to my family, maybe even to everybody around me. But it's like there's a fire lit under you to embody, identify as, and be the character that looks out for other people as a way to protect them, nurture them, take care of them, look after them. Like I was saying at the beginning of the video, I had Hurricane Hone come through last week, and that would have been a Mars in Cancer first house kind of delineation, where it's like, I'm just looking out for danger for my family and for everybody. It's the at times overprotective mama bear that can, be too much for other people. So you do have to sort of watch out for almost being domineeringly protective of other people when maybe it's not as necessary, or it's coming across overbearing. But definitely this is having to do with these very personal kind of psychological fires that are being lit in your personality and your personal characteristics as an individual, which is really coming up as a warrior, as embodying the warrior spirit, but a very protective spirit that is looking out and ultimately trying to nurture people. But the challenge with this is that it's really hard sometimes to nurture people if at the same time you're having to almost defend or cut away. Remember, Mars in ancient astrology was associated with the knife and the severing of something. So like the severing of an umbilical cord, which is associated with birth, right? Cancer and the moon, very much associated with birth and pregnancy. But the specific act of having to sever the connection between the mother's body and the newborn baby's body, right? Where previously the fetus and the mother were one. There was no separation. So the challenge and the tension with Mars in Cancer being in its fall, especially in the first house, I think is working with the difficult balancing act of how do you cut the umbilical cord as a way of looking after or nurturing that which you're separating. And so that doesn't always go together. That's one reason why Mars is fallen in Cancer, is because Mars likes to separate and the moon likes to unite or bring together or network and sort of coalesce into like a family unit. So there's a little bit of a antithetical or juxtaposition with bringing these two archetypal things together and having to embody that. It's kind of challenging for sure. So that is some of the house topics that I would look for if you are if you're a Cancer rising. Okay, now let's go ahead and let's place Leo on the ascendant here. If you're a Leo rising, Mars is entering your 12th house. And Mars in the 12th in Cancer can very, very, very much be about a period that you come back to yourself. It's like, you know how sometimes we sort of drift away from ourselves? Quite often, you can kind of drift away. Life is so busy. There are so many moving parts to life. It's so easy to be focusing on this thing over here and lose sight of this part of yourself over there. I feel, and there are many different dimensions to Mars in the 12th in Cancer, but I feel like this could have to do for people who are Leo rising, that this is a pre-period. This is a period that comes before a major strengthening of who you are and how you define yourself and being confident about that. When Mars enters Leo and stays in Leo in your first house, it's like you've arrived as the um, the lion that has won the battle, and you're fully embodied in your own power and strength. But to get to that, it's like there's almost a shadowy war that has to be fought on the internal landscapes, or maybe sometimes with Mars. And one ancient delineation of the 12th house is enemies that you don't even know are your enemies, right? The sort of the secretive or hidden things that are working against you, be it people or circumstances or your own ways that you trip yourself up. But this hidden dimension of the 12th house, Mars entering the sign of its fall, it feels like it's about a kind of internal / potentially external struggle that is a fight to be fully you that comes down the road. But it's precisely the quest, the sort of wrestling with the demons that gives you the strength. So for Leo rising, it would be very understandable to say, holy mackerel, I don't want to deal with that. This sounds horrible. But we just have to remember that you can't be who you are without having been where you've been, right? It's impossible. You are who you are because of what you've gone through. I mean, not totally, but in large, to a large degree, who you are right now is, of course, a consequence or a sort of culmination of things that you've gone through. And empowerment is a really positive thing, but okay, here's an example. Most people would love to have that killer body, right? Like be ripped. If you're a guy, you'd love to have huge biceps and a six pack and all of that. But you don't just wake up one day, like that. You have to go to the gym and wrestle with all of those demons that they're saying, oh, this is so hard. This is terrible. This isn't any fun. Why am I doing this? This sucks. I'm sore. It takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of willpower. I'm fighting with voices that are saying, just give up. It doesn't matter. You don't need to do this. Why do it? You're just, it's hard to face resistance, but it's precisely the resistance that gives you the results. Now, whereas going to the gym is kind of a, like a choice where if you really want badly to be in that kind of shape, you make that choice and you do it, right? And if that's not important to you in your life, then you don't have to do it. Unfortunately, Mars and Cancer in the 12th, these planets are moving. So there's some kind of suggestion that there's not quite as much choice. But I wouldn't be worried because you're going to get through it and you come out the other side, psychologically ripped or like you're ripped in your identity. You're very strong. So it's kind of like that, I think. It doesn't mean that it's all bad. It can be very positive. There can be very positive things that happen, like being able to finally get rid of a really bad habit that is always tripping you up, and finally once and for all going, you know what, I'm done. I'm not doing this anymore. And finally having the power to sort of move through that is a great thing. Like the 12th house is often associated with people in recovery programs like Alcoholics Anonymous. So, Leo rising, maybe struggling with addiction of some sort, may be able to finally cut that addiction out, and that's a very positive thing. But there's resistance. Of course, we have to battle the demons, and so that's sort of the intuitive feel that I get for this particular rising sign if you're a Leo rising. So hope that helps. Okay, now let's move forward, and we're going to place Virgo on the ascendant. If you are a Virgo rising, Mars is now entering your 11th house. So Mars in the 11th is interesting. The 11th house is associated with all kinds of really cool things, like everything from protective spirits, like if you had a grandparent pass away and you have always felt like that soul is looking after you and maybe keeping you out of harm's way, or somehow like a guardian spirit or like a guardian angel, or even like in places like Sweden they have tomtu or tomti, these like house spirits. But this house is connected with the angels, the genies, the advocates, the benefactors, the good spirits, either in regular people that may have stature or even authority or the power to help you, and also just almost like spiritual or supernatural good spirits. It was the house called the house of good spirit in ancient astrology. So Mars entering the sign of its fall in the good spirit suggests that this may be a time, if you are a Virgo rising, that there's a battle that needs to be waged. But there are advocates coming in to help you wage those battles. That may be what I get from this, that is coming through as like an intuitive feeling. It's like it's like a warrior showing up for you. You're in the middle of this struggle, and all of a sudden this helper warrior comes along. It almost reminds me of like Braveheart, the movie, and Mel Gibson, right? He's involved in this like epic struggle to try to bring something into success. Right? He wants freedom for Scotland, and he all of a sudden gets these advocate warriors that come in, and they're saying, "Hey, we're gonna fight alongside you." Right? I think of like that Irish guy. That is super funny. Irish guy that said that he was the what did he say? I'm the king of my island. I forget, but anyway, you watch that movie and you get the sense that there are advocates that bring the sword to fight alongside you in some way. Now, there may be a dimension of this that's psychologically difficult or challenging, or it almost may be that those warrior advocates force you into conflict, as almost like, I'm here to help you, but you're not going to shy away. It's almost like if you were, I don't know why I keep thinking of gym analogies today, but like you're at the gym, right? It's almost the guy that's spotting you as you are benching some heavy weight and you're struggling and you want to put it down. You want to put the bar down, but the guy's like, no, you're not. You're going to do it whether you want to or not. So there can sometimes be this real domineering 11th house advocate energy that's saying you're going to do it whether you want to or not. It's for your own good. So think about like a mother that comes to stay if you've just given birth and you need help because you're it's a lot of work taking care of a newborn baby, and but your mom comes and she says, I'm going to do this. I'm going to help you in the ways that I want to help you, and I don't care if you want it or not. I'm forcing this on you, or something like that. Now, as a Virgo rising, I could almost see you also wanting to be that helper, wanting to be the person that is helping friends or involved in the mix of the communities or clubs or networks of people that you belong to, albeit, at work in the social dimension, or what have you. But the groups that you belong to, groups of people, let's say, you also sort of being that protective mama helper. One thing interesting about the 11th house that Demetra George, I remember her writing about in her volume 2 book, was something like the 11th house being associated with the inner child. That it's like, how does the inner child within us as adults get along with people around us, or the groups, or the social networks around us, right? As a group, you're in a group. Are you causing conflict in the group? Are you an advocate for protecting people in the group? Something like that, I think this could be speaking to if you're a Virgo rising. Okay, let's go ahead now and place Libra on the ascendant. If you're a Libra rising, this is moving. Mars is moving into your 10th house. So I guess the obvious thing is going to be that there may be some battles, or there may be some conflict, there may be some change or stress or tension in the workplace, or in the career, or in the kinds of how you show up in the world as somebody that does action professionally. You know, it can be a practice. Like if you're a doctor and you have a doctor's office, the 10th house can be the office at which you work at, right? And maybe there's like the need to, rebuild the doctor's office, or do a renovation of the property, or something like that. Or there's the need to change careers, or maybe there's even the need to like quit a job, or maybe there is, hopefully not, but there can be like concrete things like getting fired and having to look for another job, or something like that. Now, it could also mean that you're showing up, if you're a Libra rising, as sort of the warrior that's most visible in a situation, right? It's like the 10th house has this place of, it's like the most visible part of our lives. Where are we the most visible? Might not be at like a typical like office, or at a career job, or something like that. It can be like if you're an athlete, and like we just had the Olympics, right? Those athletes were incredibly visible to the world while they were competing. So this could be any way in which you're visible and showing up in the world, and people see and recognize you. And there can be a fall from grace, or a fall of reputation. There can also be this struggle with having to redeem a reputation, or become like you're the underdog that must battle against all, circumstances to like Rocky, like training and running up the stairs in that movie, where he's, the theme music is playing, and you're like this underdog that's really out there, bringing things to success. But it takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of struggle. There's resistance coming, maybe from other people, or, or even from yourself, maybe working with some struggles in order to do what you got to do in the world. But I would look for this kind of public arena to be activated a lot more strongly. You showing up as a warrior that is fighting for a cause, fighting in the workplace, maybe having to deal with conflict in a professional setting, changing careers, things like that. It doesn't necessarily have to be bad. It could just be that the Mars is activating this very public professional arena right now, and saying this is where the hero's journey, this is where the warrior's sword needs to be taken out, polished up, and maybe employed at certain times over the next 7 months. This is going to be an area where you really need to be like a vigilant warrior that is, what would you say, there, armed, ready, fortified, protected, protecting, ready for dynamic action, ready to be aggressive if necessary, but also careful not to cut the ties that are also like a family in a certain way. Like, we all belong to, most of us, places that we work where there is like this work family, and that's what you call it, like, oh, this is my work wife, or this is my work family. And so I would look for challenge and conflict, or change, or separation, or the need to be protective or something like that in that sort of arena of life if you're a Libra rising. Okay, now let's go ahead and we'll put we'll put Scorpio on the ascendant. Now, if you are a Scorpio rising, this is placing Mars into the 9th house. This for me feels very much like a struggle of belief, or like the need to be aggressive or defend personal convictions, personal beliefs, personal understandings. It feels like what familiar beliefs do you have? What beliefs make you feel comforted, make you feel like you're at home? Those kinds of beliefs may be the topics that need to be worked on right now. So whatever that is, if you believe that this is what it is and it's been like this for a long time, and there's a certain amount of comfort that you sort of cling to about that. I'm trying to think of an example, but it's almost like this is the kind of job that I can get because of my education. Like I have this kind of accreditation, so I could work in these kinds of fields, right? I don't necessarily know or believe that I could do something other than that. Is this the time where those beliefs go through a restructuring, and there's kind of like a psychological war that's waged as to are those beliefs really true? Maybe there's a great deal of reflection about the kinds of beliefs that you find familiar or sort of hold on to, sort of bring you comfort or something like that. Now, that's a very psychological dimension. It also could be in a more concrete way. There could be something that has to do with the law or with religious kinds of things. Scorpio rising, if you're spiritual or religious, we could see the changing of religious communities, religions, or the kind of dogma in a religion sort of falling away or changing, or leaving a certain belief structure behind if it's dogmatic or something like that. And in the most concrete of ways, it's like the Scorpio rising that has gone to a church or something, decides that's it. I'm leaving this spiritual group, or I'm leaving this place behind in some way that is a kind of spiritual center or spiritual home, if you will, or having to fight for a spiritual home or something like that. And then you get maybe even conflict with legal matters, sometimes with Mars in the sign of Cancer in the 9th house, because the 9th house was sometimes associated with the law. So that real concrete ancient Hellenistic delineation would say, well, be careful of lawsuits, or be careful of legal matters or something like that. This could be not an advantageous time to get into a legal conflict. Now, interestingly enough, whenever you get rising signs that correlate to the planet that's involved, right? So Mars is the ruler of Scorpio. So if you're Scorpio rising, Mars isn't just moving into your 9th house, but it's also the ascendant ruler. So Mars in your birth chart represents you personally as an individual. So it could represent that there's a real defining period of time that is beginning, that there are real concrete beliefs about yourself personally that are really, really, really the challenge and the call to action, if you will. So that's an interesting thing. Who you are physically, who you are psychologically, who you identify is all based on this sort of foundation of beliefs that we find comfort in, and those things sometimes need to be reworked, discarded, thrown away, or defended. And in certain cases, it's going to be us that says, I'm going to continue to believe in this, even if it means that I am leaving other things behind in order to keep being the same, in order to keep holding on to the same beliefs that are really important to me. It means that I need to leave a circumstance or an environment or certain people behind or something like that. So you can see it go both ways here. But yeah, Mars being the ascendant ruler in the 9th house really is speaking to a personal journey that is somehow very reflective of beliefs that seem to connect with a feeling of comfort, or a familiar, like, this is what I believe and I find comfort in that belief. And there's a period of having to work on those beliefs, defend those beliefs, reflect on those beliefs. Are they true? Are they lies? What's going on? Do they cause tension in the family or with the home? That's also another big one that could come up if you're Scorpio rising. Okay, now let's go ahead and we'll place Sagittarius on the ascendant. If you're a Sagittarius rising, Mars has entered your 8th house, a place associated with the entangling of everything from who we depend on and what they provide us, or what we provide to others and how they depend on us. It's sort of this place where things oftentimes have to be let go of. They are destined to return back to the mother. Think of the cycle of buying something. You know, the 8th house being opposite to the 2nd house. The 2nd house is sort of this place that is very near the 1st house. The 1st house being associated with the body. So as the movement of the day spins the earth, the 2nd house moves into the 1st house archon position. So if you go out into the field and you plant a seed for yourself, well, that seed grows into food. And then what happens is the food comes to you and you eat it and you put it into your body. But at a certain point, that seed that has grown, matured, provided food, you've eaten off of it. At some point, the wheel keeps turning, and this represents that plant will eventually have to be chopped down. And there goes through a cycle of death and loss where something has to be returned back to the earth because it's simply reached its expiration. It's simply, another analogy, you buy a brand new car, you drive it, you own it, you care for it for, 5, 6, 7 years. But eventually the thing gets so old and so broken that it just makes more sense to just get rid of it and get a new car. The 2nd house would be the time that you buy the new car. The 8th house would be the time that you must surrender the car, and it's destined towards the grave. The 8th house can have this feeling where things are sort of being pulled back to the earth from whence they came, and we have to let go of them. And that's where you get things like taxes or alimony or the fear of losing things, especially psychological fear, because it feels like we're at a loss. So Mars moving into the 8th suggests very heavily that there are going to be things that psychologically we have to let go of, especially if it pertains to the home or the family. And also it could be letting go of like something we rely on tangibly, like an asset, like a spouse's income or something like that. Could be a matter of like diminishment where you don't rely on it as much. It's, maybe your partner isn't making that same paycheck, and so you can't you lose that asset as a shared resource or something like that. But it can also be such things as simple anything that has sort of you've had for a while, you've relied on for a while, it's aging, and its time has just come, and it's time to let go of it. So yeah, things like that. It's kind of a deep one, isn't it? Now, the eighth house also associated with people that pass away and leave inheritance. So you get things like that. Is there somebody like with Mars in Cancer, the sign of the moon, the sign of the mother almost, for Sagittarius rising? If you're Sagittarius rising, does a family member pass away? Does a mother pass away, but also leave you an inheritance? Or are you in a conflict or struggle around the inheritance that is left after a family member passes? These are all kind of things that get us circulating around eighth house kinds of things. There's everything from inheritance to taxes to a spouse's income. But the main takeaway here is I would look for something that it seems as though it's run its course. It has matured to the point where it has no more life. It needs to be let go of. It needs to be returned. And often that's kind of hard to return something to the earth, or to let go of something and let it leave, right? But that is feels as though what we're being asked to experience as a part of growing as a person. If you're a Sag rising, is something needs to be let go of. It can even be, something like if you are, if you have a kind of job where you're very much involved with the allocation of resources, right? Like the accounting or the looking after of the books or anything like that. There can be losses in like the company that you work for, and all of a sudden that somehow affects your own paycheck, or it affects your ability to manage the company's assets, or maybe even a spouse's assets or something like that. That's where the challenge, the struggle, the resistance, or the loss, or the what's the word I'm looking for, where you step in as a warrior, as sort of an advocate, protector of other people's of the resources that you share with other people, or the ways in which you're connected with other people in a financial way. Or it can be the emotional, psychological loss of family members and dealing with inheritances, or it can be even fears for the future, feeling like something in our lives has run their course and we need to let go of an idea or a circumstance, and it feels as though we're being dragged down and we don't want it to end, and it's really psychologically difficult. That can also be Mars in the eighth house, just this anxiety that comes along with having to let go of something, even if it's something like a circumstance or a situation, So if you're Sag rising, these may be some of the things that are coming up over the next 7 months with Mars in your eighth house. Okay, let's go ahead now and we'll place Capricorn on the ascendant. If you are a Capricorn rising, Mars is now entering your seventh house, a place associated with everything from marriage partners to legal issues, or even competitors, people that are competing directly against you in like a sale of a house or in a sports competition. The seventh house has many different dimensions to it, but it can mean anything that you face off against, right? Something that is directly opposite to the first. It's looking back at the first, and it's like, is there a person that you're directly facing off? And sometimes, we get like a marriage partner, which isn't like you're facing off against somebody that is working against you in competition. But it's just somebody that you're very intimately facing off with every day. But think about the circumstances, whether they're at work, whether they're in marriage, whether they're in, I don't know, like a competition, or a way in which you have to face off against a circumstance or a person or a situation. Look for the thing that you're facing off against to sort of, boy, it's almost like your opponent becomes either challenged themselves and is dealing with something pretty rough, or that they become a very fierce advocate or protector of something. So, like, for instance, you're in a marriage and your marriage partner all of a sudden becomes really impassioned to advocate or protect for the rights of, I don't know, of the country, right? Like, the country is going through such a tumultuous time right now. It's like all of a sudden, oh, I become married to somebody that is really very political all of a sudden, and is working to protect the country writ large, or it could be anything like that, where a partner that we are intimately connected with day to day, it's very close relationship in some way. It could be that they themselves are going through something kind of warrior-esque and like very underdoggy, like struggling to come up and rise, fighting maybe a health challenge, or maybe even fighting family issues in their own family or something like that. But it's like our partners could be really struggling with something. Of course, you get Mars in Cancer could mean the end of certain relationships, or the culmination of relationships, or even circumstances that have very much run their course. It's like a legal battle that has finally been decided, and it's done and it's over with. Could happen with Mars going through Cancer over the next 7 months in a person's 7th house. It could mean that, darn it, I lost a pretty good chunk of change when that verdict came down, or like the judgment came down. But at least it's over, or something like that, right? So that's the kind of arena that things are falling in if you are a Capricorn rising. So look to those 7th house kinds of areas in life, places that you face off against, places, people, circumstances that are somehow really in face off with you, and how that is where the tension, the passion, the warrior spirit is really bubbling up in those places, whether it's a person in that environment, whether it's us dealing with that relationship, and there's passions and tensions kind of coming in a little bit stronger in that relationship, or something like that. That's what I would look for. Okay, now if you are a Aquarius rising, Mars is entering your 6th house. Now, this is interesting because the 6th house was said to be where Mars had its joy. The 6th house was said to be the place of misfortune, or it was said that Mars would delight in misfortune, with Mars having its joy in causing. It's almost like, Mars finds delight in causing you to stub your toe in the morning, or any kind of manner of conflict, discord, accidents, injuries, health struggles, anything like that could be coming up for Mars in the 6th house. So kind of a pretty not a great place for Mars to be in. But there is also the very positive aspect where Mars moving into the 6th could really be somebody that is able to fight their way out of a health challenge, or find the energy, find the passion, find the power, like this very powerful way in which we rise up against all odds in order to overcome a challenge or a conflict, is definitely Mars in the 6th in its fall in Cancer. Now, descriptively, it sounds pretty grim with Mars in its fall in Cancer, but here is the point to hang on to if you have Mars in Cancer in its fall in your 6th house. If you're an Aquarius rising, is that, remember that a planet that has fallen down to its lowest place. It can't go any lower. It has to. The only thing that it can do is rise itself up. So there's this real underdoggy feeling of like rising up. Now, this can mean that you feel a lot of passion towards advocating for something, like the sixth house was associated with like worker strikes, or advocating for people that couldn't help themselves or something like that. It's like a place where you would fight to free people in bondage or in slavery or indentured, or it has this real underdog advocate kind of feeling to it. And so Mars moving into this house, all of a sudden, is there a lot of passion to really wanting to help, protect, advocate, struggle on behalf of something that just seems like it needs to be cared for. It's going through a really difficult time, and all of a sudden you're the warrior that shows up that says, I'm down in the trenches with you. I'm fighting. I'm not going to leave your side. And we're going to do this, that could be one aspect of this, but part of that could be a struggle through health issues or something like that. But the point is that Mars, a fallen planet, is by definition a planet that can't go any lower because it's already at the bottom, and its only direction that it can go is up. So there's that positive idea that you're coming up because something has gone low. Conversely, everybody would like to hear, oh, Mars is exalted in this planet, it's lifted up on high. Yeah, but like, let's say Mars in exaltation, let's say in the sign of Capricorn, right? Let's say you had Mars on the other side of the zodiac in Capricorn, exalted, and we're talking about Mars exalted. An exalted planet has nowhere, it can't go up any higher. It has nowhere to go but down, so it suffers a fall. So we get these rises and falls of fortune that we all go through, that we mostly don't have a choice in. Stuff goes up, stuff comes down. We have good fortune, we have bad fortune, we have health, we don't have health. Such is the nature of life, right? We go through these rises and falls of good and bad fortune. So on the one hand, it's like, well, Mars in the sixth in its fall sounds pretty not so fun, but it has nowhere to go but back towards something good, back towards good fortune. It's already suffering the low fortune, but it's going to climb up from here. Whereas an exalted Mars has nowhere to go but to maybe fall down from hubris or greed or aggressiveness or anger or something like that. There's a suffering of a fall. So this is like a recovery of a fall that comes back up. So I would think that conflict in the home or family might be issues that are real central at this point, or any kind of challenge that requires a lot of hard work and determination. But I think that is precisely the kind of energy that comes in that is leading you back up, so to speak. You have, like, we don't always have the energy to fight, right? I think Mars in Cancer really can have that energy to really fight for something and bring that energy to the area of life that needs that nurturing warrior to say, I'm going to come down here and fight. I have the energy. I have the power. I have the mindset. My attitude is one-pointed. Where do I need to, where should we strike a problem? Where should we hit this problem and kill it towards a solution? In other words, right? That's kind of Mars in the sixth in its fall in Cancer, I think, if you're an Aquarius rising. So yeah, let me know in the comments if this makes sense, if you understand sort of where the fight needs to be brought to if you're an Aquarius rising. Okay, now let's go ahead and move the real-time clock forward to place Pisces on the ascendant. Last and certainly not least here, if you're a Pisces rising, Mars is entering your fifth house. It's leaving your fourth. So this house was called the place of good fortune. Very interesting. We have a planet that is in pretty banged up poor dignity moving into its fall in the fifth house, but a place that is connected with almost like the good fortune that comes from past efforts, or like families that we belong to. Like, for example, the fifth house was connected to the land of the father. So if your father had land and that land makes a profit somehow, maybe you raise bees on your land or something like that, and there's a profit that comes from that land. Mars in the fifth could be about defending the legacy of your parents, or defending the legacy of something that is for yourself, right? Like children, they say the fifth house is connected with children. So do we need to defend or fight on behalf of the future of our children, or something like that? Or are there challenges around children? Are children being really difficult to deal with? Is a child moving away, or have we suffered a miscarriage, or something like this? But there seems to be the advocation, the fight, the warrior spirit that is called to act in this realm of the fifth house. It has anything to do from legacy, children, how we create or recreate something in our own image. It doesn't always have to do with children. It can be with anything that we create in our own image, meaning if you're an artist and you create something, you don't create outside of a vacuum of who you are, right? It's always an extension of who I am that my creations take shape and take form, right? I build a house. I don't build the house, like I live in Hilo, and in Hilo, there's Japanese architecture all around me, but I don't personally have a Japanese background. So I live among it environmentally, but my background is European, right? And I come from the state Washington, and I was raised near a town called Leavenworth, which is very deeply rooted aesthetically in this Bavarian architecture. So the house that I'm building now is in my own image, because that's where I come from. That's the roots of where I come from. That's where my family is from. That's my ethnic heritage, and so on and so forth. So you get the idea. Whatever we create is an extension of ourselves somehow. How do you advocate for that which you create, that which you have created already, the legacy of what you created, especially if it pertains to the home, the family, the assets, or the family business, or the family holdings, or anything like that could be involved with Mars and Cancer in its fifth. And then I would look for, just needing to advocate on behalf of children, or children maybe, moving into terrible twos and having a rough patch with children, or something like that. Anything like that could be coming up for Mars in Cancer in the fifth house if you're a Pisces rising. The other dimension of the fifth house that often comes in, I think, is the pleasurable dimensions of life. How we recreate instead of recreate ourselves or reproduce. How do we recreate? How do we have fun? How do we have joy? Where do we find pleasure? Is it playing tennis? Is it going to a restaurant with our partner? Is it romance? Is it flirting online with somebody? What is it that brings, or is that dimension of life that is how we enjoy life pleasurably, which is really, really, really important, especially for Pisces rising. Pisces rising, people really need that quality of pleasure, because your rising sign is Jupiter ruled, and Jupiter looks for the good things in life, right? It looks for those things that are all about the abundance of goodness, whether that's in ourselves or who we are, being kind of optimistic people that bring people together in a kind of optimism and hopeful, beneficence. Like Pisces rising has that really empathetic quality that is very loving and is very open and optimistic, and there's a sense in which Pisces rising can really believe something into existence in a positive way, right? And so it's really important to pay homage to those pieces of our lives that bring pleasure. And this may be a time where there is the need to sort of fight on behalf of what is important to us. How do we relax? How do we enjoy life? How do we enjoy our kids? How do we, unwind after work? Or how do we have fun? Even sports are involved with the fifth house sometimes. How do we compete on a team? Having fun, but also being serious competitors in a sport that is about some kind of spectacle of pleasure, right? Sports are generally kind of for entertainment. So the realm of creativity, entertainment, recreation, children, the need for joy or pleasure, and these kinds of arenas. Look for, I would say, struggle, challenge, conflict, maybe loss, to sort of be a period marked by, having to go through that in order to define all of those things, or some of those things more strongly. Mars being the thing that will really define what is happening in those areas. So that's what I would look for if you're a Pisces rising. Okay, that is what I have for horoscopes. Thanks everybody for watching. Hope you guys got something good out of this. Now remember, there are so many different ways in which the astrology gods show up, especially horoscopes. So drop me a comment if you notice something that seems to correlate with some of the house topics we were taking a look at today for your particular rising sign. I'd love to hear what you guys have. Until next week, I'll be back again, and I hope you guys have a good one. Bye for now.